Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined by my co-host and best friend, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Good. We're in May. Big sports weekend, and it just keeps rolling on with the NBA playoffs. How about yourself?
Doing well, man. Got a haircut a little bit. I know it might be a little hard to tell on camera, but just got like kind of the sides buzzed a little bit, feeling the breeze again,
Nice.
and it feels nice getting getting that fresh cut. So I'm in a good mood from that. And you're right, we're in the thick of the things with playoffs, and we'll be talking a lot about second round action today and some late breaking news. Before we do that, just again, shout out to you, the loyal listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for subscribing, liking the shows, commenting, and sharing with your friends. If you have someone interested in basketball, that likes conversation that goes a little bit deeper around the topic of sports and sports culture, please share this podcast with them. And as always, thank you so much for your support. So, Justin, as usual, we have a lot to talk about, no shortage of news. And I want to dive right into it. Before we get into the playoff action, I want to mention some news that came out just about 20 minutes before we started recording. Rookie of the Year award has been announced. I guess I was a little shocked with how unanimous it was, but maybe we really shouldn't be. Victor Wembanyama wins the Rookie of the Year award. He is the first San Antonio Spur to do this since Tim Duncan did it in 1998. So shout out to him and congratulations on that achievement. When you look at the stat sheet, of course, he is a monster. He is an alien, as his own branding suggests, with how many blocks per game he gets and the things that he can do, how well he shoots the three-point shot at his size, etc. Didn't really translate to a lot of wins on the court this year. But I think just about everyone is agreeing, including Howard Beck, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, talking about just this topic, that he has exceeded the massive hype and expectations on him. Justin, your thoughts on this rookie campaign and maybe the competition with Chet Holmgren?
Yeah, I think it goes aligned with everybody's thinking. I agree with you. If you take a look at the vote count, I mean, Chet Holmgren got zero first place votes
Yeah,
and
it was
98 second
unanimous.
place. Yeah, so I mean, he got one third place vote. You take a look at Brandon Miller, Charlotte got one second place vote, and really Jimmy Vasquez Jr., who he had a solid season, got 10 third place votes. So if you take a look at, I think Victor, I mean, it goes along with the rest of the league. Just awesome. I think we've heard even rumors of just other possible upcoming free agents wanting to play with him. Just had a phenomenal season. This is just a taste of what the NBA can get ready for not only just the players but fans. Just a fantastic player. I'm not too surprised. I just think with a lot of these awards is also narrative driven. And I just didn't feel from a narrative standpoint, right or wrong, Chet Holmgren didn't really fit in terms of overcoming just the hype and just what happened with Victor. So I pretty much was not surprised by this outcome. I was surprised by like maybe him not getting a couple of votes, but in terms of it being anything competitive in terms of rookie of the year, I'm not shocked. So congrats to Victor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And with Chet, I think another thing to point out is it's not truly a rookie season. This is his second year in the
It is.
league. And I know you still qualify for the rookie award if you get hurt before the season starts, like Chet did last season. That happened to Blake Griffin as well, as I'm sure you remember, Justin, where
Yeah.
he was eligible his second year because he got hurt before the season started. And then he actually, I believe, won that award. So, in my opinion, point being, I think Chet would have had to even further exceed expectations with this being technically his second year on the OKC roster. And I think, this is not any sort of snub on Chet. I think he had a fantastic season, and they are sitting pretty at the one seed in the West, as you all are well aware. So, tip of the cap to Chet, who had a fantastic season, is just Wemby jumps out of the screen, those numbers and the highlights as well. If you go watch them, of course, hoping that next year there can be a little bit more substance behind those numbers and wins backing them up. That's obviously the next step for Wembenyama, and that is at the forefront of his mind as well, which I love to hear. So he's got a bright future ahead. It might be the understatement of the show for today. So let's move on. You and I agree on this topic, and let's move into our second round predictions here. I want to follow up. We made our predictions, and if you didn't stick to the end of the show last time around, I'll go ahead and remind you guys. I had Denver in 7. Justin, I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you had Denver in 6
That's
against
correct. Yes.
Minnesota. And I did say I felt this was going to be the best series of the entire playoffs, even better potentially than whoever faces the Celtics or whoever comes out of the East in the finals. I think this is it in terms of the amount of playoff excitement. And it may also be it in terms of impact on career trajectories. You can see what this will do if Jokic repeats for his legacy. You can see how it will launch Anthony Edwards and the narrative that is forming around him that we've touched on quite a bit on the show. If he's able to be the giant slayer, so to speak, and take out Jokic and these defending champs. Minnesota shocks in game 1. Anthony Edwards, I believe, had 43 points, 7 boards, and 2 assists in this game 1. And you and I, both as people who picked Denver to win this series, Justin, I want to get your thoughts. Any reservations about those picks? How are you feeling after seeing one game? At the time of this recording, we've got a couple hours until game 2 tips off.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I was actually in downtown Denver for game 1. So a lot of Nuggets fans headed to Ball Arena, a lot of excitement, but as you said, Matt, did not translate to a win for the Nuggets. I am nervous, I'll be honest. If you listen to Nikola Jokic's post-game press conference, I think they asked him, paraphrasing here, what do you need to do to stop Gobert and just cat and just kind of the defense. He's basically just said, clone myself. So
Yeah.
that technology does not exist. So that's not good.
At least
So
not that we know of.
yeah, at least in terms of the mainstream public, yeah, I don't know if that exists yet. Yeah, I'm concerned a bit. I think I was mentioning the Nuggets deficiencies with their bench. I think that is a growing concern. And honestly, this is the arrival of Anthony Edwards. Now, I think I think the talk around him is a little bit too much. I mean, we've heard he's the next Michael Jordan. That's a little nuts. But I mean, he scored 43 points. I mean, you can see he has that killer mentality. And I think for a lot of hardcore basketball fans, that's what you're so much drawn to, is just a player with so much like having that mentality. Now, does that mean they're going to be a phenomenal player? No. I mean, you could argue LeBron, who's you know, greatest, arguably the greatest player ever. Did he say he was a killer and talk crap about his opponents and cross chopped and did all this? No, and he's phenomenal. So I don't think that's a key trait in terms of being a legendary player. But there's no doubt Anthony Edwards is thriving under this pressure. Yeah, it's a concern in this series because home court flips to Minnesota. This is a must-win for Denver, and from the TNT side of things, seems they point out that Jamal Murray does not look right in this series, which is very interesting. And he had a very lackluster game. So yeah, I am generally I'm generally concerned, especially since I picked the Nuggets in 6.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points, and I'm with you on just about all of that. I'm not ready to back off of my pick and say I was wrong or anything. It actually, in a way, makes me feel a little bit better about picking this to go 7. But you're right. There's a lot of things with the Timberwolves, and you do some digging too, and you realize that Tim Connolly set up this Nuggets team that is now so successful, and he has set up the Minnesota Timberwolves to beat this Nugget team. So Tim Connolly, deeply knowledgeable of both of these teams, and currently has set up this Timberwolves team more recently. So shout out to him. But there's things with physicality of this Timberwolves squad. What you touched on in terms of their depth does look better than what the Nuggets have. Really, the advantage right now that I would say you could still argue is that the Nuggets have the best player in the world in Jokic and Jamal Murray, but you bring up correctly the concerns about the calf strain and how serious is that? Is that going to be an issue that goes throughout the series? Is he getting enough treatment on it that he can recover and boost his performance a little bit more? We don't know. We're going to have to see how this all plays out. The other thing that I think is a fair question, yes, Anthony Edwards has these incredible numbers. I think he's averaging over 33 points per game in his postseason career, which is incredible at his age. The reason he's drawing comparisons to MJ and some of the other greats is because of those playoff based numbers and the greats that he compares to, in early in his playoff career. So the question, though, when you're dealing with a young star, is can he sustain this? Can he keep that consistent? Because I do believe the Timberwolves need to have him perform at maybe not 30 plus points per game for the series, but very close to it in order to be able to vanquish the Denver Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are that good that if Anthony Edwards scores 15 points, maybe even in the low 20s up to around that number, which is certainly reasonable if he just has an off shooting night and can't get to the basket, then you may have some concerns and see those weaknesses on the Minnesota Timberwolves side that I think you and I both kind of touched on were maybe there in terms of offensive execution if Anthony Edwards doesn't have it. So going to be very fascinating. And I stand by this being the most entertaining series of the playoffs.
I think the series that's taken off now with the Nuggets and Pacers might give it a run for its money. I mean, that's
The
kind of
Knicks.
the Knicks. Yeah, sorry, the Knicks and the Pacers. It's kind of like an old school rivalry renewed.
Yeah.
Both teams, I think, they don't look like the certifiable favor. We'll discuss later. But in terms of entertainment value and the rivalry and just reigniting that excitement, it might give it a run for its money. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Since you brought it up, let's go ahead and go there. And I let off with the last series with Denver and Minnesota. So why don't you take us through your thoughts on the New York Knicks, the 2 seed versus the surprising 6 seed Indiana Pacers, who of course eliminated the Bucks.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting team, and we have interviewed a lot of journalists over the years in terms of this rebuilding process. From their PA announcer to several journalists, including Alex Golden this season, and they seem really high on the Pacers' future. And the missing piece that I have heard is Pascal Siakam. I think that's going to be really a key to this series because we've discussed it ad nauseum about the Knicks missing Julius Randle. I think that's really going to hurt them. And as much it's been weird because I hate bandwagon fans, but I be a liar if the Knicks have not captured my heart in this playoff series. But my mind is picking the Pacers, and that's what I've gone with in 7 games. I just think the Knicks look what I saw in overtime and when I saw kind of in clutch situations. I mean, if you take a look at some of those games coming very close with the Sixers, I think they got bailed out with some bad ref calls. I think there were some brutal turnovers by Jalen Brunson. I did not like that at all in terms of kind of a clutch situation for the Knicks. And I think with the Pacers having home court, I mean, we didn't really see that with the Sixers. Basically the Knicks had home court every single one of those games. I don't think that's going to be the case in Indianapolis. I think it'll be a solid home court for
Well,
the
and the
Pacers.
Knicks, yeah, the Knicks will
Oh, the
have
Knicks.
home
I'm
court
sorry, my
advantage.
bad. That's right. They have home court. I apologize. But I just think, I guess my point is when you head to Indianapolis, um, you know, their fans could be surely behind the Pacers. And in my opinion, I just think that's going to be a factor in this series. So overall, even though, like you said, Matt, the Knicks do have home court advantage, I still like the Pacers in this series. Sorry to say, but my heart's going with New York.
Yeah, no, you've been very consistent with the Pacers in the playoffs, and I have to say they impressed. I mean, I picked the Bucks to come back, and the Pacers just just squash them. And unfortunately, injuries played a huge role in that
Yeah.
series, obviously. But kudos to the Pacers for getting the job done there. And you only have to steal one game in Madison Square Garden. And as awesome as the Knicks fans always are for like post game highlights and things like that, I don't think it's such a home court advantage that the Pacers can't go in there and get a game, maybe even 2 games. However, I personally am not as high on the Pacers just because they are such an offensively driven type of team. And I'm curious how, I mean, in fairness, they weren't extremely battle tested last series. So there could be a little bit of a veil over our eyes in terms of how we're perceiving the Pacers.
Fair.
Not that you're wrong, because you picked that series correctly over me in the first round. Um, I think if the Knicks are allowed to play as aggressively as they want to play, then this could be quick work of the Pacers with how physical the Knicks like to take it. And that could really throw them out of their offensive rhythm in Indiana. But that's a big if too. We know that officiating can really vary and swing, and even if it just tends to favor the home court team as it tends to do, my prediction could fall away. And if the Knicks are getting called for a lot of fouls in these games when they do take things physical, that's huge advantage to Indiana. So I don't feel great about my pick, but I do have the Knicks in 6. I will say if your pick is correct, and I'm kind of rooting for it to be now that I read it. If Indiana wins this in game 7 in Madison Square Garden, can you
Wow.
imagine
Yeah.
the videos that are
Yeah.
going to be out there, and the
Oh
freak
yeah.
out that is going to happen in New
No,
York?
it's true. No, it's gonna be crazy. Yeah, their fans are pretty nuts, and as I've always said, I mean, I would love if the Knicks go to the NBA Finals just to have Ben Lyons, Dexter Henry, just to kind of get the sense in that city because I think it's going to be nuts. I want to ask you real quick. We don't have to spend too
Sure.
much time on this, but this is not on our format sheet, so I'm kind of surprising you with this question.
All
But
good.
I've noticed in this year's playoffs in particular, it's been a lot more physical.
Yeah.
Um, are you a fan of that? And do you think this will kind of maybe shut up kind of the older heads saying, hey, this softer generation, you get touched, there's a foul. It seems to be very, very physical. I mean, I feel like there's hand checking. It just seems more aggressive across the entire playoffs. Somewhat inconsistent in terms of calls being made, not necessarily praising the refs too much, but just in terms of physicality, it seems like it's picked up this year compared to years past. Am I right or wrong on that?
I would agree with that assessment. And me personally, I love it. I
You
want
too.
physical basketball.
Me too.
I want it that way all season long. I want the pace to be slowered. I want defense to have more of an advantage than they currently have. I'm not saying it has to be even with the advantage on offense, but I like, as I've said before, I don't really like when the pace is teams averaging above 115 points per game. I would like that down in the like 105 range, maybe, which I know a lot of people feel is way too low. And that's fine. That's subjective. That's just difference of opinion. But we tend to see every year the screws tighten a little bit when the playoffs roll around. It seems like it kind of comes in waves. Like you notice a little bit of a shift in the first round, and then it feels like it backs off in the second round until maybe the conference finals hit again, and then usually through the finals, it we tend to get more physical basketball, and part of that too is just we're getting such a high level of competition. But I would agree with you. I mean, with teams like Orlando that we might talk about a little bit, with teams like even the Nuggets last year, the Nuggets Lakers series last year was very physical. It was
Was.
pretty physical this year too.
Yeah.
Um, and this Denver Timberwolves series, one of the reasons it fascinates me and I keep praising it is it's gonna be very physical if they let them play the way both these teams want to play. Uh, so I'm a huge fan. I don't know. Do you like it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And to me, I'm very interested to see because as time goes by, everything evolves, right? And shooting gets better. So with the scoring, I'm wondering how much of a dichotomy is going to be in terms of, a lot of players are really awesome at the 3-point shot. And, players are more talented. And if the defensive intensity goes up, how much of that scoring difference will really happen? I think honestly, it'll probably balance itself out. I mean, it's not like the 1990s. I mean, everybody shoots threes. Everybody, has. I think you take a look at field goal percentages. I think that has really improved in terms of just shooting overall. So I'm curious to see how the tightening of the physicality is going to work into how much shooting has evolved over the years. But I love it though. I love the physicality, the intensity, players getting upset, bordering on it getting, kind of crossing over to where it's not taboo in terms of punches being thrown. But players holding back. I think we saw that a lot with the Sixers and next. That was very physical. Emotions got very heated in that series, but it was fun to watch. So I'm with you. More physicality, the better.
Yeah, and as long as we don't have increased Patrick Beverly incidents
God,
like we had over the weekend, and I'm sorry to
brutal.
bring it up, but it was brutal. Throwing a basketball twice at fans in the stands.
And
I
how's he not suspended? We talked about LeBron. I mean, he actually assaulted a fan twice.
He hit a lady in the head with a
Yeah,
basketball and then threw it again right at a guy's chest.
yeah.
And apparently, what sparked it, if you read the headlines, was just the fans heckling with Cancun on three when they were coming out of a huddle, which certainly doesn't deserve that type of a response. I mean, that's pretty soft
It's
on
pretty
Patrick
pedestrian.
Beverly's fault, and
I
I understand tempers flare and all that, but e- everyone's in unanimous agreement. I'm just curious how severe that suspension is going to be
I think it should
at
be
this
several
point.
games.
I,
And I
I
mean,
agree.
this is the same guy who assaulted Chris Paul after Chris Paul destroyed him, and he assaulted him. I call that assault. Like that
Yeah,
was not like a light push. I mean, that was blatant. And then what Patrick Beverly did to the reporter in
right
terms of
after the game.
in the post game press conference, that I think the ESPN Phil producer, that was a disgrace as well. So I don't know what's going on with the league, because even with the Patrick Beverly situation, the way the reporter was treated was got way more coverage on, at least on X, than him assaulting the fan. Which I get. I'm a was a journalist. I get it. I think what he did at post game press conference was reprehensible, but he assaulted a fan twice. I think
Right.
that takes precedent in terms of him just being a jerk in a post game press conference. That got a little coverage, surprisingly. I don't understand. But
Yeah, and I guess in fairness, at least we've got until basically October before the suspension will be enforced anyway.
well, you can
There
still
is a little
announce it
time to
though.
investigate it, but
Yeah,
I'm with you. I think they should have a decision by the end of this week. If it takes longer than that, I don't really understand
me
what's
either.
going on. He was banned, is banned from appearing on ESPN, on the ESPN platform,
Yeah.
as a result of his treatment of that reporter, which I, of course, agree with you. That was ridiculous, and
But that's
kind
it.
of hurts in a way. It's unfair, but it kind of hurts the player media movement because it makes it look silly for players to have podcasts, and then that was affecting the interview. And I'm not against player media or anything like that. I'm
Yeah.
certainly not saying that. It's just a bad look when he's flaunting his podcast in this interview, and you can't ask me a question because you're not subscribed to my podcast. Just very, very ridiculous.
Well, a couple of things. One, ESPN issued a statement saying they denied banning Patrick Beverly off their platforms.
Oh, my
Um,
bad. I didn't see that.
no, you're good. Yeah, now who knows if that's true or not. Number two is how many times Patrick Beverly's on there anyway. So to me, it's just like that seems very surface. We're gonna ban him off ESPN. Okay, whoops, you do. Like who cares?
Yeah, it's
Um,
a little slap on the hand.
yeah, no, but this ridiculous what happened. In terms of what you said about the player empowerment move in terms of like players going into media, I just mean Patrick Beverly's a clown. Like I don't. I mean, you take a look. You have Trey Young. You have Jalen Brunson, Draymond Green, who we have been extremely critical of. At least
Paul
Draymond,
George.
Paul George. I mean, all those. I mean, you take a look at LeBron and JJ Redick. All those are credible podcasts. I mean, this guy's a clown. So I don't think it's going to hurt too much unless you see a trend. But like you said, Matt, I mean, this could be a thing of empowering other jerks around the league in terms of him doing this. And supposedly, I saw on X too that he's been doing this to other reporters throughout the season. So this is
Mm.
not an isolated incident either. So I don't know. I just think it's pretty deplorable, and I hope he gets the maximum punishment because that was a joke what he did.
Yeah, yeah, no argument there. um, let's get back on track with our playoff rounds, and I apologize for the digression because I brought up Patrick
No,
Beverly,
I brought up the
but
refs, so
that was a huge story over the weekend.
yeah.
Um, let's go into what I think is maybe in some ways the least entertaining of the four series that we have in the second round, which is the Boston Celtics versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Everyone kind of has this written off as a foregone conclusion that the Celtics should sweep the Cavaliers. Maybe that's true. I think Cleveland does have a decent amount of talent, and I'm not sure of the status of Jared Allen at the moment, how present he'll be during this series. He was injured against Orlando. I don't know if you caught game seven, Justin. I caught a good chunk of game seven yesterday when Cleveland beat Orlando. And Donovan Mitchell was very impressive. I think he could steal a game or two from this Celtics team. You have the injury to Kristaps Porzingis, which slows down the Celtics a little bit. Uh, I think the Celtics should be able to sweep this team, but I just kind of with this core and Tatum and Brown, nothing against those guys. They are great players, but it it rarely feels like you get these killer instinct moments from this Celtics core over their tenure. So I could just see them dropping a game or two just because maybe a lack of urgency, maybe it just takes them a little bit to fire themselves up and finish this series. So I picked Boston in 6 because of this, but I still, in spite of that number, I would be shocked if Cleveland really felt like they were giving the Celtics a run for their money.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm not sure if it was recent or not. I apologize, but I saw Jason Tatum in a press conference, and somebody asked him, "Are something like that? Are the Celtics tough?" And he really took exception to that. I think he even cursed. Like I think it got under his skin, and good. I think that bodes well for their mentality in this series of not taking it easy and feeling a little bit disrespected, which is awesome because when you have a team, maybe if you feel like you're coasting, I mean you're susceptible for the upset. And I think with Boston, this is a great opportunity for them to take care of business against Cleveland, who's I agree with you, Matt. They're not a bad team. They're certainly reparable, but I just think Boston's just overmatched in this. And well, honestly, they need Kristaps Porzingis if they're going to win the championship. And by them, I mean that might be extra motivation as well to take care of business early, so Kristaps can get a bunch of rest and be ready maybe by a little bit of the Eastern Conference Finals or the NBA Finals. I have them in 5 games. I really think Boston's gonna have an elite performance here. I don't have too much to add with this series, but I can see what you're saying with Donovan Mitchell. He gets a game. I agree. I think he's phenomenal. Um, I think it's interesting you mentioned other podcasts in terms of where his future lies. I don't really know what he wants because I think Cleveland there's a great base and a great future,
Yeah.
and I don't really understand unless it's um, management, which makes sense based on their reputation with dealing with LeBron. But other than that, and from a team standpoint, I don't really know what his motivations are, other than maybe he doesn't like Cleveland or management. But in terms of the actual team, I think there's a promising future for Cleveland, especially in the East where it's wide open. Even as much as I praise Boston, they are susceptible, and I think with some right roster moves, I think Cleveland could be right there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Donovan Mitchell may have a little bit more of that killer instinct from he has quite the playoff history and some great performances.
He does.
I don't think, like Shaq's assessment with him, I don't know if he can be your A1 and take you to the title, but he's had impressive playoff performances to his credit, and he may have more of that killer instinct than Tatum and Brown and that Celtics core.
Yeah.
I just think I agree with your assessment that that Celtics team is so talented. This should still, even with having to contain Donovan Mitchell, it should still be a fairly easy series for them to beat Cleveland convincingly. And I also agree with what you said about him fitting in with the Cavaliers, and maybe hope springs eternal there, because I don't know if you saw the clips, but Donovan Mitchell was really like Darius Garland was having a bad game, and Donovan Mitchell was being a good teammate to him. Very encouraging, just trying to keep him engaged and letting him know to keep shooting, keep playing, stay active. Was doing that for a lot of his teammates too. Was really talking a lot on the bench. He wasn't removed from the bench or kind of, they're down by 18 points. In fairness, he could have shut down and just marched his way into free agency or whatever his future plans are, but he didn't. I mean, he showed investment in his teammates, and I thought that was great to see, especially with all the rumors surrounding him. I really like to see that. So, I just want to give him basically kudos for that. That was awesome to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's a promising sign that maybe it could be changing its mind. So we'll have to see how it plays out for Cleveland.
Right on. Let's move on to our last series here, and I think maybe in the argument for what might be the second most entertaining series of the second round on my power rankings here. You're right. I think Indiana versus the Knicks is going to be very entertaining. I really 3 out of the 4 of these series should be highly entertaining. So we're pretty lucky, and this has been playing out well for the NBA as a whole in this second round. Give me your thoughts on our number 1 seed in the West, Oklahoma City Thunder, the young prodigies, you might call them, led by Shea Gilgis Alexander, taking on the 5 seed Dallas Mavericks, who just vanquished fairly handily in 6 games the Los Angeles Clippers, and kind of showed they have the Clippers number now at this point with their past history. Give me your thoughts on OKC versus Dallas. How's this going to play out?
Yeah, I'm going to read you a quote from the Oklahomian. It says, "Then there's the scoring duo of Shea Gilchrist Alexander and Jalen Williams, which will put Dow's improved rim protection to the test. OKC is also deeper and has a coaching advantage with Mark Degensalt. Give me the Thunder, but with my own comments, I am nervous about Luka and Kyrie. I agree. I'm taking OKC in 7, but I just think Kyrie's invigorated. I don't think
Yeah.
I've seen him smile this much. He just seems like a different guy compared. He was miserable in Brooklyn. It's interesting because he was like a Nets fan growing up, but he just seemed like he hated it there. And it seems like him and Dallas are such a breath of fresh air. I mean, it's really is tough because you have Luca and Kyrie. They have proven themselves in the playoffs with some big moments. Kyrie, is NBA champion. His resume is speaks for itself. It's really really tough to pick against the Mavericks, but I'm going to. I really like OKC, and I think it's just a bad matchup for them against the Dallas Mavericks. But I do think this is going to be kind of a trial through fire for OKC. I mean, this is a true test of what they can do. And again, we're going to see how good this team is. There's been a lot of hype. There's been a lot of questions in terms of, is this a legit team that could carry the Western Conference into the future? We're going to find out in this series in the Nuggets. I mean, if they're able to if the Nuggets are able to beat the Timberwolves and they get past the Mavericks, I mean, if they end up in the NBA Finals, I think there's no doubt that this team's for real, even if they get swept by the Celtics. I mean, no matter what happens, I mean, these 2 series are going to really test what OKC can do, and that's why I am picking them at 7. But I am nervous, and I think the coaching advantage lies with Degan Salt here over Jason Kidd, full disrespect included. So I do think that OKC will take the series, but it's going to be really close.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick, even though I disagree with it. And you're right. I think this
It's
is a
close.
tough series because you can't really totally equate regular season wins to what's going to be playoff success. I mean, we've had plenty of cases where a team sweeps another team in the regular season and then they struggle badly and lose the series to that same team same year in the playoffs. I think we could see something similar here where we just kind of don't know how these two teams will face off against each other when this intensity is dialed up to 11, so to speak, for the playoffs. I'm with you on OKC having the coaching advantage with Coach Dagnall. And that is what makes me the most nervous about picking Dallas to win this in 6 games. I think this is kind of one of those things that Luka needs to do as part of his sort of hero's journey, so to speak, as being a competitor for face of the league. He's been the young prodigy for a long time. It's kind of time, we've been saying for a couple years now, but this season especially is kind of time to move into like, hey, I'm going to be a factor on the title front as well. I'm not just going to put up stats. I'm actually going to start taking people out in the playoffs. And I love that we get this matchup of Luka, who I just mentioned, versus Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, because this was for a brief window in time a debate and a talking point. And I tend to, in spite of picking Dallas, I tend to like what SGA brings to the table a little bit more at this point. Luka has never been a number one seed. He fills up the box score, but we have yet to see it translate to truly winning basketball. I mean, Dallas, you could argue, disappointed a little bit being the 5 seed this season. But the other side of that, of course, is that, yes, it is a very deep Western Conference. At least they didn't tank this year like they did last postseason to avoid the play-in tournament altogether. And I'm with you on Kyrie Irving. I think one of the big things, and kudos to Kyrie, was that he was willing to back off on the offensive side on the ball and lock down James Harden for one of those games in that most recent series. I think that does show legitimate maturity on Kyrie's part.
Agreed.
And so, hey, while I'm throwing out kudos, I want to give kudos to Kyrie Irving as well. And that highlight with him doing the behind the back and crossing over, hitting that layup. Oh, just chef's kiss good. Glad that we have this Kyrie engaged in the playoffs this way. So ultimately, I picked Dallas because of the extra star power that they have. However, OKC is deeper. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And if Luka and Kyrie get tired and run down a little bit, I could definitely, I would not be shocked if you're correct about OKC in 7. I would not even be shocked about OKC in 6. But for right now, with the added experience and the pressure on Luka that I want to apply, I'm going to go ahead and pick Dallas in 6
No, I feel that pick. It's really, really close. And again,
for
for
sure.
the Mavericks, I feel like you're saying, Matt, I think you are correct. I think that Luca's going to take a lot of heat if they lose. I understand OKC is the
Yeah.
number 1 seed, but like, when is he going to ascend, right? Like, he's supposed to be, everybody talks about this guy being one of the faces of the league. You got to win. And, I'm not on this. I feel kind of two sides about this. I think I am more critical of players, if they don't win championships. However, you at least got to go to the Western Conference Finals, to the NBA Finals consistently to be one of the faces of the league, and Luca has not done that. So, in terms of consistency over a long period of time, so I think we need to see that from him in order to consider him like a top face of the league, especially with the rise of Anthony Edwards. I mean, he could just get blacked by him. So, and not to mention, there's Jason Tatum. I mean, there's other guys that could be coming for that spot. So he could be kind of lost in that background fairly quickly. In this series is certainly a proving ground for him.
Well said. So to recap, we've got from our picks last week, Denver in 6 for Justin, Denver in 7 for me. we'll see. We'll see
Yeah.
what the Timberwolves do later tonight after this recording. Um, we've got in OKC versus Dallas. I'm taking Dallas in 6. Justin is taking OKC in 7. I'm very nervous about that. Celtics versus Cleveland on the Eastern side. We're not as nervous. I've got Celtics in 6, maybe a little lackluster, but still dominant. And Justin has the gentleman sweep, Celtics in 5. And in New York versus Indiana, Knicks versus Pacers, I've got the Knicks in 6, and Justin's got Indiana in 7. I love this because we have even more differences in our picks compared to the first round, even with the extra series. So maybe, hopefully, a great sign of the entertainment value that this second round could bring to all of us good NBA fans out here. So we hope you enjoy the second round. Be sure, like, comment, share, subscribe, and comment. What are your picks? Who are you siding with in these areas that we differ? And who do you have in these series? Always curious to see that feedback too. We got to get going. Be sure you check out our evergreen video stock and podcast stock. If you are ever looking for extra NBA content, plenty of evergreen content there. For Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. Take care. We'll check in with you again soon. Peace out.
See you next time.